Why techies are more than often leftists. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and prior to the late 1980s, people who were particularly smart in math, science, engineering, and technology were often looked down upon. They probably didn't make a whole lot more money, if any more at all, than the good-looking and confident people that played sports and went to universities to get degrees in business and things like that. However, by the late 80s, things were starting to change, and by certainly no later than the end of the 1990s, the nerds were making dramatically more money than the confident and handsome jocks on average, as it was not all that rare to find 20-somethings who were millionaire tech workers, if you lived where I did, which was Seattle, Washington, during the period when Microsoft ruled the tech world. The headquarters of Microsoft is located about 30 or 40 minutes away from downtown Seattle by car, and I knew more people who worked there than I can ever possibly remember. In fact, these people were in my family, and at least one family member pretty much only dated tech workers and had friends that were almost exclusively composed of such types of people. I remember being a small kid and never having the foggiest idea what these people were talking about when it came to things like P2P networking, Linux, LAN, HTML, Java, JavaScript, C++, and whatever else they'd be talking about. Truthfully, the furthest I ever got into coding myself was a program that was designed to be a bit of a game called Logo Writer, where you programmed text and numeric commands for a small turtle so that it would draw and animate various things for you. I actually really enjoyed the turtle program, but that was in middle school when I was about 13. And when I went to high school at the alternative school, I was far more interested in becoming one of the cool kids and got really into electronic music. Though, for whatever reason, I was still really good friends with numerous computer geeks, including somebody that gets paid a lot to work in tech to this day as a software engineer. That being said, computer geeks were always my comfort zone as a kid. I was personally always nervous around alpha male types, because even though my father was a bit of an alpha male himself, at least when he was in the right mood, he was also a computer science professor that worked at numerous companies designing microchips. Honestly, most of the people I met before I was 18 were very soft-spoken, shy, and unassuming. But oh boy, some of them were rich. And you'd often be very surprised by who owned what type of house. You see, I began DJing when I was 16, and I played out at my first rave in 1999. I played drum and bass music, which, despite the fact that it was usually extremely aggressive music, as it was basically the heavy metal of the electronic music world, it actually was extremely intricate and technically interesting from a mathematical perspective. Here's a small sample of one of the songs I produced in my late 20s. Yes, I arranged all those noises on my computer line for line, though there is a drum sample that I am using called the Amen, which was recorded from a live soul drummer in 1963 and has been the most sampled sound in human history. It's in all sorts of songs. By the time I was DJing this music, not uncommonly when I was 17 and 18, I was also hanging out with all sorts of tech workers that were huge fans of this type of music. Some of them made music, DJ'd, or created visuals themselves as a hobby outside of work, but most of them just found electronic music really cool, likely because they were really into technology, and thus, how the sounds were made and came together was something that fascinated them. And let me tell you, these people loved the crap out of me when I was 17 and 18. Not simply because I was maybe kind of a nice guy, and not simply because I was legitimately considered one of the better or best drum and bass DJs in Seattle in the underground circuit, which I could only DJ at because I wasn't even old enough to get into clubs before I was 21. But I think also they liked me because I reminded them of themselves in a sense. You see, I was a skinny, shy, and soft-spoken gay guy in my late teens, though I've changed. In a general sense, I was nervous around alpha males and the types of people who generally filled up the drum and bass area at the big raves, who were largely very aggressive dudes with crappy attitudes, like those that you'd find at a metal show. Those types of guys often underestimated me as a DJ, assuming that because I was a quiet gay kid that was, fairly good looking, I was probably more of a novelty than a serious DJ. But then when it came down to it, I was a far more technically skilled drum and bass DJ than most people who played at the bigger raves. So I was a bit of a hero for a year or two in the section of the underground scene that was largely full of computer geeks that preferred LSD to ecstasy or shroom tea to cocaine or meth. The thing we all had in common was that very few of us had an easy time growing up in school. While few of us were gay, and there were only a few racial minorities, almost every straight guy that I can think of was the type of guy that must have gotten picked on a lot growing up. And remember, many or most of these guys worked in tech. I remember so many details of being at houses full of these types of people, sometimes mansions, and being high on some sort of chemical or another, like shrooms or whatever, telling weird stories to each other about our lives while we were in the dark with a black light on. I remember more than one time where I'd be carrying on a conversation with somebody in their mid-20s or so, and they'd be totally fascinated in hearing about my life, being that I was a gay drum and bass DJ, which was seriously unheard of by itself. And then they would freak out and be like, "You're 17? Are you serious?" when I'd tell them my age. It would legitimately temporarily make them nervous, as I was a minor on drugs with them. Overall, though, we had a really good time, and we started to feel as if there was some sort of tides shifting. You see, meritocracy was starting to privilege people that were once seen as weak. The nerdy guys that were into The Cure in high school, the geeky girls who were obsessed with Doctor Who and Star Trek, and the skinny underage gay DJ all realized that as long as we had the goods, we could win. As long as they could make money in the tech world, and as long as I could do electronic music better than the jock types, then we were the cool kids, at least according to us. Thus, we all had a tendency to side very strongly with leftist politics, because leftist politics was always marketed as something that would give a chance to the talented and capable people who never really got their fair shot at things. And since we kind of were that, and we had a personal track record of succeeding when we finally got a chance, we figured that everybody else deserved a shot. And so, that's why I think the entire tech world has always had this far leftist backbone. More than simply the fact that science and math geniuses have always had a hard time making money early in their careers, I think that these are people that culturally relate very strongly with people that are often seen as weak or oppressed. People in the tech world have a tendency to figure, well, I did well once they finally gave me a shot, so I can only assume that underrepresented minorities and women merely haven't been given a chance, which is why there are so few of them in this company. Many well-to-do geeks in the current year probably assume that many or most people who aren't well-to-do must have merely been denied opportunities to succeed, and thus it was super easy to convince a bunch of these geeks that although life was actually probably pretty rough for them in school and they largely got picked on, they were still actually privileged simply because they were doing relatively well by 2012 when the intersectional feminist propaganda sprouted up in vast quantities. You see, since these nerds have spent an entire lifetime overcoming social obstacles and stuff of that nature, they had an intrinsic emotional vulnerability in that they wanted to extend the same blessings that they have received to other people that they felt deserved the chances to succeed in a lucrative career that they had eventually obtained. They assumed that other people merely haven't gotten the chance. However, this left them blind to realizing that a huge portion of the people being ushered into companies like Google during the social justice era of Obama's term were not deserving in the least. They were underqualified affirmative action hires who were often entitled intersectional feminists themselves. At least certainly the ones on the diversity teams and the trust and safety councils, and probably a fair portion of the people those people insisted that the company hire. In the end, it will be hard to convince everybody at the companies that these individuals that were hired don't deserve any more chances. But personally, being that it was meritocracy around tech skills and intelligence that was the game changer for these people's lives, I certainly don't think it will be impossible to get the qualified tech workers on board with alt tech. At least if alt media does our job properly and makes them realize just what they are missing in the new world. I hope you like this video. If you have any money to donate, PayPal would be great, and times are tough.